All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. As always, your host, Brandon. Matt lost special time. Matt, welcome back. It's been a little bit. You did holiday. You're back. More managerial changes in your world between Tottenham and Chelsea. It just, you can't catch a break at the end of this season.
Yeah, just like I was saying to you just before we started, as we talk today, there's a chance that Tottenham are going to sack their interim manager, Christian Solini, which would make it 7 managers for me between Chelsea and Tottenham this season. Safe to say that is completely unprecedented in my world, covering those two clubs at the same time. So it's unbelievable. It's really, really unbelievable.
Oh, for sure. We were kind of, laughing beforehand. And when that many changes have been happening, 50% are between two clubs, you clearly know that these clubs are trying to find their North Star. Not many things are going right. I mean, no club wants to have this many managers being sacked, especially Bowling and Bali. They're trying to get their feet underneath them too. And it's just been a bit of a, tough season, right? I mean, I guess they're trying to make all the changes they possibly can in search for that stability that I think they would prefer.
Yeah, look, I think they'd be honest enough to admit that there's been a few missteps and a few mistakes. But it's, they're trying to get themselves into a position now where it offers them some stability. I think I think I said this on the last pod, that the next appointment for them, they know it's absolutely enormous. And it needs to be one that's not going to change for a while, and that they get some stability and some structure at the club. So that is what they're aiming for right now.
For sure. Well, obviously, in this one, we'll touch a lot on the managerial candidates. It seems like Mauricio Pochettino become the front runner, which obviously I think you're pretty excited about because you know him from so well. You tweeted, he improves young players, overseen a squad overhaul before, manages upwards very well, won trophies, Premier League and Champions League experience, managed through a stadium rebuild, interesting, and charismatic. I just said he ticks every box you could think of, but he's not the only one. So let's pause on Poch. You said that they've done some due diligence with Celtic. I think a Dutch manager in there as well. And candidates have pulled out. It's been a busy 5-6 days.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back to this time last week, I can't remember which day it was I first reported that Luis Enrique was out of the race. I can't remember whether that was maybe Tuesday. I'm struggling with my days with all the managerial changes. I think maybe Tuesday last week I reported that Luis Enrique was out of the race. And that was the point at which things started to really narrow. So as last week we went through Enrique dropping out, Chelsea deciding they'd had quite a lot of talks with Enrique, Chelsea deciding he wasn't quite right for them. It left us with thinking probably at that stage that Nagelsmann was the favourite. And yet by Thursday, actually on Wednesday, I first found out that there'd been contact made with Pochettino, along with Nagelsmann and others. I think we always expected that, so that wasn't huge news in fairness. But then Thursday was the day when we started to really sort of hear of a warmth growing towards Pochettino. I ended up writing something on Friday morning that there was just a sense in that morning that Pochettino was coming up on the outside. And obviously, by that evening, Nagelsmann had dropped out. Now, two sides have two different stories on this. Chelsea have their side, Nagelsmann's people have their side. To be honest, it doesn't really matter. He dropped out. Whether he dropped out, whether the club dropped him out, whether it was a sort of mutual dropping out, doesn't really matter. He dropped out, which left us basically with Pochettino overwhelming favourite. It emerged that there's interest in Vincent Kompany. I think that's probably more something that's targeted down to the future, that maybe they see him as being someone they need to sort of explore and look at, because one day in the future there's a possibility that he's going to be a really top coach. I'd have been very surprised if that was thinking that they were realistically going to appoint him this time around. And then there's this mystery third place. I kind of take that third place as being a bit of an open spot, if I'm honest with you. They've done very thorough due diligence on people like Arne Slot at Feyenoord, Ange Postecoglou at Celtic, Ruben Amorim, who we know at Sporting Lisbon. And I think that's a bit of an open spot for the element of change, whether anything were to change. But as we sit here now on Monday afternoon, I would be extremely surprised if it wasn't Mauricio Pochettino now. He's really, really accelerated into front runner, number one target. And yeah, it's his to basically turn down, I think.
So some extra pressure was kind of added last week too. Thiago Silva had some pretty direct quotes for the club and leadership. Didier Drogba says he doesn't recognize his club anymore. They're starting to take a lot of people are starting to be, I think, speak very open and freely. I think they know that we're in this point where, like, if they're I'm sure they made their voices known on the inside of the club, but now they're making them known outside the club. And I think it kind of caught me off guard a little bit. At least I was surprised. But like Thiago, what he said, what they had to expand the locker room, we need to make a decision and move, seems really practical. And it's just something that, is something that hopefully the club are listening to. And part of the changes they have to make. The squad is way too big, and surely these candidates are going to be coming with some ideas about how to resolve that. Or is that totally the sporting directors handling that decision?
No. If we focus in on I'm going to just say Pochettino. Look, this might bite me in the neck in terms of the candidates, but I'm fully of the belief that Pochettino is going to be the next Chelsea head coach at the moment. So I'm just going to say Pochettino. It's easier. Pochettino want a smaller squad, and that will be. I don't think it even needs to be a condition of his employment, because that's what the club are planning to do in any case. But he will fully support and back that. He will want that. I mean, on the website, it's about a 31-man squad, but then you have to factor in the fact that Nkunku and Gusto are definitely coming in, which takes it up to 33. So you probably need to lose 6 to 8 players at least this summer. I mean, they can do that easily should they want to, in terms of a couple of them who are in on loan, obviously João Felix and Zakaria. But yeah, I actually think to Pochettino, knowing how Pochettino works very well, to Pochettino, the outgoings will be this summer way more important than the incomings. I don't think he'll demand an awful lot incoming-wise, but the outgoings will be hugely important to him.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so if we narrow in on Poch, as much as I try to not, commit, but okay, let's focus in here. As we've talked about, Chelsea have had Tuchel, we've had Potter, we had, interim technically Bruno, now Lampard. Are we really going to announce another one? Would he come in this season? Are they going to Lampard finish the season? Any idea on this timing? Because it's just a lot to take.
Yeah, I think they will announce fairly soon. I couldn't say it's definitely the next few days. I would expect it to be this week, but I can't say that for sure either. But I think they will announce soon. Interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if they're talking to him about trying to take a game or two this season, but I don't see an upside for him on that at all. I would be very surprised if he were to agree on that, just because the squad are in a difficult place. The mentality's in a difficult place. The squad's too big at the moment. What good would it do for him to manage a couple of games and Chelsea potentially to lose both of those games? It wouldn't do the club any good. It wouldn't do him any good. I don't see the upside in that. I hope he's just announced swiftly and that he takes it on from the moment the season finishes. And let's face it, we all know that in the meantime, he'll be doing plenty of work. He'll be talking to all the sporting directors. He'll be talking to the owners, probably even talk to Frank. He might even talk to some of the players. He would have a nice long run up to that summer. And I hope that's the way it gets done, but I know for sure it will be.
Bienvenido, Mauricio. Welcome to Chelsea. Yeah, I agree. Like, do not need to force this before the end of the season, as far as like him being in the dugout. Frank's already there. Like, you're not going to get anything, at that point. Just say, hey, step back, work on the high level stuff. Maybe he's working with the sporting directors, talking about the squad opportunities, kind of getting up to speed on what is going around there. But you'd also have to say, this is a month-long process, exhaustive, detailed. Like, is that enough time for them to really analyze, or did he just kind of knock their socks off with the interview?
Well, you got to remember, he was the only other candidate seriously interviewed when Graham Potter got the job. But I mean, it was pretty much sewn up with Potter. But they did speak to Pochettino, and so there's been due diligence being done previously into Pochettino. From what I understand from the first lot of talks with him last week, he's knocked their socks off with his energy. I think this is a much better time for him. He hadn't that long been out the Paris Saint-Germain job the previous time. I think he has been away, got refreshed. And from also what I'm told from his side, the prospect of it is really, really exciting him. He's very, very excited about it all. So, yeah, I like you say, that it's not like they needed to do loads of due diligence, but I think they've had a lot of conversations with him in a short amount of time. And as I say, the energy that's coming from him, I think, is the real thing. And remember as well, this is actually a very different looking squad to the one that he would have talked about last time. I mean, such is the change at Chelsea. But actually the squad now, albeit being way too big, the way the squad has developed actually suits him way more than the squad would have done before. It's a younger squad. There's people in there who I think could really benefit under him, someone like Mudryk. If you look at what he did with Son and the sort of similarity between their qualities and things like that, I actually think squad now, what he'd be able to talk about is more suited to him, albeit it's far, far too big.
That's a great point. We're going to take our first ad break when we're back, talking about the squad and how Mauricio might work with a bunch of those players and what they think. So thank you to the sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right, Chelsea fans, want to give you a shout out to Indeed.com. That's right. When you are drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could handpick the best stars for your business team? If you're building your talent roster, you need Indeed. Look, with Indeed, matching as soon as you sponsor a post, you will get a short list of quality candidates whose resumes match exactly what you're looking for on Indeed. Boom. It's hiring at warp speed. So what do you got to do? You got to visit Indeed.com/Blue Wire to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Link in the description below. Terms and conditions obviously apply. Cost per application, pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, Matt, great point about Mauricio working with players and developing them. Obviously, that's something, that I think is really important. I've looked at a lot of matches, and our average age is like around 24 and change, 24 years old. I mean, that is trending quite young, especially for a big club. And that's what Thiago Silva is skewing it heavily the other way. So in your piece, you even said that some of the Chelsea players would be really excited to work with Poch. What's the feeling that you're getting from inside the player side of this, I guess?
Yeah, look, I can't name names, obviously. Of course. But it doesn't take a genius to work out that, there's players in that squad who play at England with an awful lot of players who have worked under Pochettino and who have had their careers, let's face it, turned around and really thrust forward by Pochettino. And they are very aware of what's been said about Pochettino in the methods and how highly those people rate him. There's even a certain somebody in the Chelsea squad who comes from the same country as Mauricio Pochettino, and I think knows a fair bit about him and stuff like that. So there's an excitement there. I've got to be a bit careful what I say without revealing too much of where these things come from. But I mean, what I would like to sort of make the point is I will always look back to Pochettino's time at Tottenham because I covered it so closely. The squad the team that Pochettino built at Tottenham that was so sort of successful in quote unquote in terms of having a title challenge and getting to the Champions League final, it was built around the fullbacks. At the time, Tottenham had the best fullbacks in the league, I felt, in Kyle Walker and Danny Rose, Kieran Trippier, sort of to that. The main thing, the most important thing of the team. Now, if you look at where Chelsea's strengths lie, fullback is going to be one area. You've got two of the best already in Reece James and Ben Chilwell. You've got Gusto coming into that. And I would actually think that Cucurella would be looking forward to working with Pochettino because I can see him really having a positive effect on his Chelsea career. So already that's very encouraging. I've already mentioned Mudryk, who I really do believe could be his kind of Son figure. I know for sure, and I don't really want to talk about a contract situation because I'm just a little bit bored of it and it's still nothing's really happening concrete, but I know for sure that Pochettino absolutely adores Mason Mount. Pochettino used the way he plays, loves his character, loves everything about him. And then you've got Nkunku coming in, which I think is interesting because he's this player who can score a lot of goals without actually playing as a striker. And I wonder whether Nkunku could be used in a similar way to the way Dele Alli was used under Pochettino, when Dele Alli would play very, very close to Harry Kane and score an awful lot of goals. I do think whether that's something that Nkunku could be used as. And then like the energy of Fernandes and Kante just suit Pochettino so well. He loves that energy. The one thing that's on them are always near the top. I think one problem that Chelsea have had of late, and Lampard sort of alluded to it again, and he alluded to it his first time, and we've heard it from Tuchel, and we've heard it from Conte. This team sometimes doesn't just run enough, and it sounds very basic. Believe me, they'll run under Pochettino because he gets his teams running like absolute machines.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing that kind of came out about like the lack of fitness, and Tuchel didn't bring his conditioning coach, and Potter with injuries and stuff anyways. And that's kind of like becoming maybe like a developing story of like the undercurrent of maybe why this season also struggled a bit. And it's just kind of like one of those unsung heroes apparently within a team and a staff that drives a lot of importance for those reasons. So it's been interesting hearing about that, because I don't think you hear like a lot about that position and it's how important it is to them. When it comes to also the squad overhaul, you said obviously you had to do that at Tottenham. We said this can be a really big piece here. I think that there's probably some natural, ends of the journey for some players, to your point.
Yeah.
A couple players on loan, couple players on short contracts, maybe some players that were ready to go, and now Chelsea can kind of finalize on that. I guess back 4, back 3 system wise, do we think that leads into it, or is it really just going to be the opportunistic ability of Chelsea to move anyone on?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be the case of move anyone on. I don't think I've seen Pochettino occasionally play with a back 3 before, but not. He's a back 4 guy basically. But looking at the number of centre backs and stuff, I don't think it will massively. Systems will particularly affect his decisions. He's actually not. If you talk to Pochettino, he will always downplay the importance of systems. He's not someone who thinks a system wins games. He's basically a guy who thinks mentality wins games, and that the mentality within the system has to be right. So I would be surprised if he was making decisions based on systems. I think he'll make decisions based on the players he believes are best equipped to cope with what he wants them to do. And like I say, a lot of that will be to do with mind and physicality in terms of right mentality and ability to run.
Yeah, I definitely remember that because he was a defensive midfielder in his career, very scrappy, tough, and I think that edge and mentality is something that's lacked a little bit this season. And surely that's going to be one of the first things he does is drive a lot of confidence, make them hard to beat, and hopefully kind of get that edge back. Don't you think?
I think that's what it's weird, because of the Tottenham link, it's hard to convince some people around Chelsea that he actually fits what I believe Chelsea have always been strong at. But I actually think that Chelsea fans, as long as it starts well, will absolutely grow to love him, because he's a fighter. I mean, and he's a bit of a street fighter as well. His background in Argentina is a street fighting background. His playing style, as you said, was a street fighting player, and his management style has that street fighter in him, and he likes his teams to have that in them as well. He used to love the fact that Dele Alli used to get himself into trouble at Tottenham. He used to talk about the fact that he thought Dele Alli had to be on the edge to be at his best, and he would actually almost encourage it sometimes. And I think Chelsea fans will love that about him. He's got a similar sort of characteristic trait to Diego Simeone in that he's got traits of Jose in him. He's not the same type of manager, but he has got traits of Jose's fighting spirit in him, and ability to carry people with that us against them mentality a little bit. I think they'll like it.
Well, a lot to kind of piece and just kind of take in, especially as we look over just the different stuff. Is it fair to assume that PSG was a rough run for him, right? It seems like he's had enough time to really kind of decompress, let that go behind him, come back refreshed, like you said, with new ideas and things. But yeah, he got chewed up at PSG. Unfortunately, it seemed like even when things went well, he was kind of getting the raw end of the stick there.
Same as everyone, same as Tuchel, same as Ancelotti, same as a certain Unai Emery, who I'm currently in love with. It's a running theme. I mean, you have to say that it's a running theme that managers get, as you, in your words, which are good words, chewed up at Paris Saint-Germain, despite winning things, and yet come out the other end and tend to go on and do very well. Again, Ancelotti, Unai Emery won the Europa League with Villarreal, now doing great things with my club. Obviously, everyone knows what happened with Thomas. I do think you have to take that into account when assessing managers who have gone through PSG. When he won the league, I think the year he won the league with them, they won it by 15 points. I think that was more than any other team in a major European league at the time. People will always criticise the standard of the French league, but still winning it by 15 points is a hell of a long way to do it by. I think his home record at PSG in that season was absolutely incredible. Yeah, but they clearly have difficulties. I've been fortunate enough to talk to ex-PSG managers about what it's like to manage PSG before, and some of the stories I've heard have been, quite frankly, astonishing. I probably couldn't really repeat them on here, but believe me, there's a lot going on at that football club.
I think it's easy to see that from the outside looking in, without a doubt, and how well Tuchel kind of rebounded for that when he came to Chelsea. Yeah, I feel like those managers are probably a lot more willing to play ball in certain things because they're just happy to be in a safer place. So from the process, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, obviously people are looking at the Chelsea ownership quite hard at the moment, and the fact the fact they've been quite hands-on. You know, I wrote the story last week that they'd gone into the dressing room and Todd had used the word embarrassing and things like that. And they're getting a lot of sort of criticism, and people are looking at the way they operate. But Pochettino has worked under Daniel Levy and he's worked under the PSG ownership. I'm pretty sure Todd Boehly and Badad Iqbali are going to seem like pussycats to Mauricio Pochettino. I mean, he is the longest serving manager under Daniel Levy by some considerable distance. And the way he managed that relationship was far more skillful than any other manager or head coach has managed to do under Levy. So he is good at managing upwards. He is good at it. And I would say that the past two ownerships he's worked for will have been a lot tougher than what's to come, as long as, barring any hitches, and he does take over at Chelsea.
Safe to assume that the long-term vision is still firmly planted in this club's idea, and that Pochettino fits into that?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, his, like I say, everything he did at Tottenham was long-term. He stayed there long-term. His decisions around the squad and players were always long-term. He used the academy more than any other Tottenham manager before or since, I think. He will definitely fit into their long-term plan for sure. That's not to say, I mean, so the problem so far is that on one hand, they've done an awful lot of long-term, and yet there's been a lot of short-term decisions. That needs to meet in the middle somewhere now when they get this next appointment in. That needs to meet whereby more care is taken over the short term, but less decisions are made for the short term and fit in with a long-term brief. And that's where things probably need to change a little bit once this appointment's sorted out.
Absolutely. All right. One more follow-up when we get back. We're going to take our last break from the sponsors. Again, thanks for them for financially supporting the show. We'll be right back. Right. So Boehly, Iqbali, they're figuring it out. They got this new team in the background with Poch. The situation of next season is, I think it's fair to say, no European football. Less games, huge squad. We remember that when Antonio Conte came in and he only had to play one game a week. We all remember the Arsenal switch at halftime. And, I think he played the smallest squad the rest of the season the way out. We've got all these young players and just less opportunities. It's a double-edged sword, right? Like on the one hand, it's positive because you get to work with players, less injuries, less fatigue, but at the same time, less opportunities maybe for a squad to get involved and get minutes. How do you think he's going to balance that next season?
It's a difficult balance. It is a difficult balance, and that will have to be taken into account for sure when they plan the squad and the clear out and the loans and all that kind of thing for next season. It's going to be a tricky balance. I mean, remember, there are the cup competitions, and they do have the freedom to go further in those cup competitions than this season, should they wish.
Drew City twice. what are the odds of that?
Yeah, but that would obviously be beneficial from that point of view. But he will use a squad. He's very. I remember he would very rarely get caught into talking about a starting 11, a best 11, a best player, a few best players. Always the group, always the family, as he would put it. And I do think even without European football, he will make sure that a squad is used and that people are given minutes. But without European football, there's only so many players you can use, and that's going to have to be taken account of. But players are going to have to understand that as well. I mean, at the end of the day, they're at Chelsea Football Club. They're going to have to compete for places. Players can't be guaranteed minutes at Chelsea Football Club, otherwise something's gone wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. And you'd hope that we could go a lot further in cup competitions and things, but I just think of the likes of like a Levi Colwill. What does he do at the end of the season? Some of the other, lone players, Romelu Lukaku. Any idea where the stance on that player is? Heavy wages, might have a great end of the season with Inter Milan. Do they want to pick him up? Do they keep him? I mean, like you're saying, there's still some really big decisions to be made with this club.
There's some huge issues. I mean, I would imagine Levi. Well, the club have said that Levi is going to come back and be part of the squad. They've already made that clear. I think he'll get a good opportunity under Pochettino. Actually, I can see him getting a good opportunity. Yeah, but people are going to have to compete. This is what being at a big club's all about. I mean, a lot of these young players who are at a big club for the first time are going to have to learn that. They're going to have to find that out now, that being at a big club is about competing and not being guaranteed minutes and not being guaranteed starts and stuff like that. And that's just going to be the reality, and that's what they need to learn.
Big preseason, obviously coming back to the States. They're going to have some games. I'm just interested to see how many cuts or changes are made before they get stateside, right? You think of players even like Callum Hudson-Odoi's had a largely forgettable loan. Does he come back? Like I said, the Lukaku's, these things. Because remember last summer, they wouldn't do anything until they got Lukaku sorted and moved out of the squad. And then they went to play ball. It's just, like you said, I'm just really, really interested to see how, again, another season of summer of transition here in the States goes. They clearly have learned some lessons. They're going to stay on the East Coast. I think the miles are a quarter of what they were before. So there's just a lot for him. I'm sure he's excited. I'm sure he's refreshed and energized, but it's just like, I think the more we kind of step back and realize there actually is a lot more to do rather than just show up with a squad of 30, like there's a lot to get to that point.
I think it's easier said than done, but I think they will try very hard to get as much of the clear out as they can out of the way before the pre-season tour. I think there's certainly a recognition that the way the squad was handled with the pre-season tour last year wasn't good. A huge number went, some ended up getting cut from that. It was really messy. So I think they want to go to pre-season with the squad in good shape. They won't be able to do everything before then, but they will try to do as much as possible. And like I say, it's easier said than done. I also would hope that if he wants to, that Pochettino would be allowed to make some big decisions on that squad. I mean, the simple solution is don't take them all, and that will be harsh on some players maybe, but don't take them all. Take a smaller squad, and players who clearly are part of the clear out or don't really have a future don't need to go. I mean, Conte did that with Tottenham last season. Now, I know obviously Tottenham have had just as chaotic season as Chelsea this season, but he was right to leave people at home. I've often thought that maybe one area that Potter could have done something differently on was once he had this weird situation with the Champions League squad and the Premier League squad and everything, and the huge squad, was to actually in training just take the Champions League squad plus Badia Chile, and they were the squad he was going to train with, and everyone else had to train somewhere else. And he could have said to them, guys, this is the situation we find ourselves in, the situation I've found myself in. That's one thing I maybe think that he could have done differently. And if in pre-season the squad's too big, I think that's what tough decisions just need to be taken, and there needs to be a first team squad.
Oh yeah. I mean, we all remember Batshuayi playing a lot of minutes. We all remember Kennedy playing a lot of minutes, even out of position. At least the plan will force them to reduce the number of players. They just quite literally can't take everybody. But yeah, I mean, it is going to be another kind of reset this summer. And Chelsea bounce back. I'm still trying to figure out if it's a blessing or a curse, that one game a week. I know it can be, but if it doesn't go well and you don't have big games to rally the squad and kind of get that boost from, it can be hard. So I was talking to one of our chats, I think with Ollie, and we're talking about how this next manager needs to have that experience because they're going to have to keep the squad engaged for 5 days a week, 6 days a week versus, hey, another game, recovery today, film, do light work, and then match. And I think that's going to be a big change to this job too. And it seems like that is something that Pochettino has done a good job of keeping spirits high, keeping players engaged, being able to find enough stuff to do during the week to improve the players.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right. That'll be different for a lot of those players. A lot of those players won't be used to it themselves even. But that's just where they are now. I never think I know it's quite a fun debate, but I never think it's a good thing when a club like Chelsea aren't in European competition. I can't really see an argument why it would ever be a positive thing for them, but that's just where they are. And they've got to manage that the best they can and deal with that the best they can. Make sure it doesn't happen again, basically.
Yeah. What about staff wise? One of the things I was a little confused about with Graham Potter coming in is, they brought in like a goalkeeper coach and a couple other staff when we have Enrique Lario already here. There was some duplication of roles and things like that, which, is a little bit weird. Any idea if we're going to hit reset? Ashley Cole got brought back with Lampard and some of those players. I think the way he was livening up those fullbacks before the Champions League game, I think a lot of fans are like, we want Ashley in this next coaching staff because he gets it. Any idea what that coaching staff, backroom staff might look like?
Yeah, it'll look the same as his Tottenham and PSG backroom staffs. Pochettino has a staff, and they work for him and they don't work for anyone else. And when he works, they work, and when he doesn't work, they don't work. So he has a guy called Jesus Perez, who is a little bit like his kind of assistant manager, but he also does a lot in terms around the conditioning and fitness and things like that. Very, very highly rated. He has a goalkeeper coach who will definitely come in with him. He will absolutely demand that. So I do wonder whether Ben Roberts will end up moving on at the end of the season when Graham Potter gets another job, which he will do because he's very much a Potter guy. And I wouldn't really see why he would hang around under Pochettino's number one goalkeeping coach. And he also has a first team coach. There are also other staff that Pochettino likes to work with, and it'll be interesting to see how many of them. But there's at least 4 who will be, at least 3. Yeah, at least 3 and 4, including himself, who will be non-negotiable to him. I've got to say, I'd be surprised if any of the guys who have come back in with Frank hang around. I don't really see it. I know that it would be popular with some fans, but I just don't really see it realistically. It will be Pochettino's staff. And so there'll be another staff overhaul. And that's another point, apart from the fact they need to stop hiring and fire managers, they can't just keep the whole staff as well, keep burning through all these staff and things like that, because these days when you appoint a manager, everyone comes with their own staff. Who'd have thought in the past that a caretaker manager brings in his own staff, and here we are with Frank who's brought in his own staff. So that's another aspect of it.
Yeah, Frank's staff still haven't been announced.
That's just weird. I think it obviously is the fact that some of Graham's staff are still on the payroll, shall we say, and therefore there's probably legal issues around announcements.
Yeah. It's just all a bit of an interesting end to the season. And I'd expect Poch to bring in his people. We talked about, when Potter came in, he got an incredible amount of people that kind of came in with him. Do you think that Poch, is he a data guy, Moneyball approach? Any idea?
I don't think I think I just spoke about Jesus Perez then. I think someone like Jesus Perez, his sort of assistant, is probably more a guy who looks at the data, certainly in terms of player fitness and conditioning. And I think Pochettino looks at data probably with him on conditioning. I don't think he's a big data guy. He's actually, in some respects, he's quite old school. He's a real one for mentality and feel of people. He talks about this. I retweeted a piece I wrote a few years ago when I was saying that he should have got the Man U job. He believes in something called Universa Energia, which is a universal energy. And it sounds mad, and I can't really adequately do it justice by trying to explain it very quickly now, but it's in a piece I retweeted about him at Manchester United that goes through some of the theory behind it. But it's basically a feel and a positivity that he likes to see off people. He very much judges people not just on what they produce in terms of a quantifiable output, which would obviously be in data, but very much in the feel he gets from them and the mentality he sees with them. And in that way, in terms of his man management, he's probably a little bit more old school than these guys now who are very, very, very data driven. But certainly Jesus on the conditioning side will look heavily at data from that point of view.
Well, I mean, obviously, it'll be kind of interesting to see all these different pieces pull together. I'm sure they're kind of talking through how things are set up and how they'd operate, which is good. But it's been interesting to learn a lot. I think a lot of people, including our man, Sam, CFC Central, can stop looking at videos from other managers. He spent all this time on Luis Enrique, Matt, and then he dropped out, and he spent all his time on Nagelsmann, and he dropped out. So I think Sam's ready for a break.
I'm not being funny, but that's just the way of the world. I mean, we as journalists end up doing that because you have to be prepared for that day where the announcement drops and all of a sudden everybody wants a lot of information and a lot of content. So you do end up researching, and I've done it myself. You end up wasting a lot of time researching people who you may never get to write a word about, to be quite honest with you. But that's the nature of the job. But yeah, I feel like it's really, as I said, barring some sort of disaster, I feel like it has now really narrowed down to Pochettino. And I don't really think that the other names that we currently have around are realistic. I think something would have had to have gone badly wrong for one of them to actually end up being offered the job this time around. Although I do think it's quite interesting that maybe relationships have been built for one day in the future that may never arrive, but clubs do that all the time. Michael Emenalo, when he was at Chelsea, used to constantly meet managers, not because he was going behind managers' back, not because he was doing anything, about in terms of trying to replace managers, but he would see it as due diligence. He would meet managers all the time to inform him of who the people were he wanted to keep an eye on, who the people were he felt were bright, because you never know when that day is come where you have to suddenly look at the market again.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we'll see what has to come. I have to ask one contract update, Matt. You've teased it before. N'Golo Kante, signed, sealed, delivered. Can I sleep easy?
It's got a bit quiet, hasn't it?
Oh, I regret asking. I thought I'd give a layup and we'd all end on a big positive Conte note. But all right, stay tuned.
I hope so. I had more confidence a couple of weeks ago, and that's not because I've heard anything bad. I want it out there. I have not heard any contradictory information that's gone bad, and I did notice there was a report out of France recently, which really did speak to the fact that the expectation remains that it is pretty much there, and he will be confirmed as signing. But I just wish it hadn't gone this quiet, because I would like to see that over the line too.
All right. Well, anyways, on that note, Chelsea fans, we're going to wrap. Matt, though, we really appreciate all of the Poch background knowledge you can give. Maybe you can dust off some of those drafts and just change Spurs to Chelsea and get some of those articles out from the past.
Yeah, I'm going to actually. I'm going to reread. I'm going to reread his. Do you remember he did the Tottenham book? He did a Tottenham book about how he managed Tottenham, and I've got that somewhere, and I'm going to dust it down and give it another read because I remember it was very, very interesting into his methods.
Oh, I like it. All right. Well, we'll find it and figure it out as well. But appreciate you, Matt. I'm turning on the notification. Sounds like a big week. I don't want to miss anything. So link in the description. Follow Matt on Twitter. Obviously, all of his articles online as well. We appreciate it. We'll be back with more content later this week, Chelsea fans. So until next time, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.